Hello, I'm Katie Hu, though to most of my family, I'm Hu Ge-Juan. Hu Ge-Juan. I like the sound of that. You see, like you, I'm a student, but unlike you, or most of you, I'm an American of Asian descent, an Asian American. There are over 17 million of us in the United States today, and tomorrow, there will probably be more. That's because America has long been the land of opportunity for immigrants, like my parents from Taiwan. Growing up, both of my parents were very poor. But after moving to the United States, my father trained in the art of Asian cuisine under a master chef, and my mother, always good with numbers, managed their finances and began saving their money. Eventually, they invested that money into a restaurant of their own, and today, after over 16 years of successful ownership, they're both retired. My parents came here to seek a better life, and I like to think I'm proof that they succeeded. I think you'll agree that the impact of immigrants from all over the world on America has been amazing. For example, did you know that Google, YouTube, Yahoo, and eBay were all co-founded by immigrants? They came from Russia and Germany, Taiwan, and elsewhere. A Cuban immigrant made Coca-Cola into a top American company when he became its president and CEO in 1980. And back in the 1920s, it was immigrants from Eastern Europe who created Hollywood. So how is it that so many immigrants who came to America became so successful? I think you already know the answer. It's freedom. Every year, there's a foundation in Washington, D.C. that rates the freest and least free countries of the world. The freest countries are those with the greatest economic freedoms. And at the top of the list is tiny Hong Kong, even though today, Hong Kong is part of China. In this video, you'll meet a fascinating man who took advantage of all of the freedoms he found in Hong Kong. But as you'll see, his success was not without great risk. I think you'll really like the amazing story of Jimmy Lai.
Hong Kong, one of the richest and freest places in the world, where a hands-off government policy has long encouraged private investment and entrepreneurship. Of Hong Kong's many entrepreneurs, one man stands apart, a self-made maverick who heads a vast business empire worth millions of dollars. A family man, at peace with himself, who day in and day out is driven to succeed. His name is Jimmy Lai, and this is his amazing story. Jimmy Lai was born in Guangdong province, in the city of Guangzhou, once called Canton. He was 5 when Mao Zedong's communist revolution reached the area. His family's property was stripped away, their lives decimated.
It was a very confused time for a kid. I didn't know what was going on. I was maybe 4. Well, we were unfortunate because our family was rich family. So naturally, when you're rich, you become the enemy of the people. When I knew anything, I knew that the adults were very busy either being sent to labor camp, for instance, my mother only came back during weekends to take care of us. After weekends, she had to go back to labor camp. And at that time, me and my twin sister and my elder sister, only the 3 of us were still in Canton in the house. So we were young kids left with us. We had to cook ourselves, and all that. We just have to survive, struggle as a kid. Although, luckily we were kids, we didn't know anything better.
Jimmy was 9 when he went to work in a railway station, carrying luggage.
It was an experience that was very educational for me. It changes my purview of the world. One day I was carrying the baggage for a guy. After he gave me some tips, he fell into his pocket and gave me a bar of chocolate. I had the bar of chocolate in my hand. I turned, and I was so hungry, you know. I turned and I bite, and it was so tasteful. It was amazing. So I turned and I asked him. I said, "What's this? It's chocolate." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Hong Kong." I said, "Hong Kong must be heaven because I never taste anything like that." So that triggered my determination to go to Hong Kong. And then from that day on, I passed to my mother to allow me to escape.
The taste of chocolate fueled young Jimmy Lai's imagination, although he could not have imagined the dramatic differences between his homeland and the freedom in Hong Kong.
Communist China in the 1950s and 60s had a command and control economy in which entrepreneurial decisions and visions and choices were not preserved, were not respected.
When no one can rely on the rule of law and the rights of property, pure logic tells you not to invest too much of your time and energy and resources into any property.
The biggest impediment to economic growth is when people feel the threat of confiscation of their gains from wealth-creating activity through either government or other private actors. And so, for example, in the third world, there's a lack of stability from both the government confiscating your wealth and your neighbor confiscating your wealth.
As a 12-year-old, Jimmy Lai knew nothing of economic theory. But in the Guangzhou train station, he had tasted economic freedom.
I started to pester my mother about allowing me to escape to Hong Kong when I was 11 and a half. So it took me a year to convince her. She always said that, you know that going to Hong Kong is like you going to the moon, because I would never see you again. She thought that I would never be able to go back, and she would never go to Hong Kong to see me. And she was very reluctant to allow me to go to Hong Kong, but finally I did, and when I was 12 and a half.
Jimmy knew a policeman who got him a visa to Macau on China's south coast. That night, he began the journey that would change his life forever. Some of the Macau fishermen were part of a smuggling operation where freedom and profit met.
I was put in the bottom of a junk, and fishing junk, together with like maybe 100, maybe 80, I don't remember. We were crammed together. And after a few hours, they allow us, when they see no boat, they allow us to have some fresh air, and then went back to the bottom, and everybody vomiting because, And by the afternoon, we arrived in Kowloon, and at that time, when you arrive in Hong Kong, you touch base, you're legalized, you're considered legal. I was taken to my mother's sister, and she paid $370 for the smugglers. Later, I found out how poor my mother's sister was. She and her husband was living in a bed among many beds in a compound. So they had the food cooked next to the bed and all that. They're very poor people.
Their poverty meant that Jimmy was sent to work the same night he arrived in the Kowloon district of Hong Kong.
I was taken to a factory to work as an object worker. And I was very happy in the morning. I smell a lot of food that I never smell, the great aroma of food. And the manager gave me $10. That was a lot of money at that time. And I was very happy. It's as if I arrived in heaven. Although, as a young kid, we had to wake up like before 7. We got to whip the floor, finish everything, open the door before 8 o'clock people come, and then we work until like 10 o'clock. But it was a very happy time. It was a time that I know I had a future. I know I was chosen.
He soon noticed that those who were getting ahead spoke English. He found an old man to teach him the rudiments of the language. And by the time he left the factory, Jimmy could read and converse in English. He was 14 years old. 4 years later, he became a garment salesman, and his work eventually took him to New York City.
It was almost like, what I saw in movie, the big buildings, big cars. It was a wonderful time, it was very constructive. I learned almost everything I learned to build the foundation of my life from there, Well, I had a mentor who's a very good salesman that I met. And actually I stayed with him and his wife. So one day he told me, he said, look, Jimmy, I taught you everything you had to learn as a salesman. If you want to go further in your life, you got to be educated, you got to have an intellectual pursuit. I'm going to take you to one of my friend's house for dinner tonight. It was 1967. It was a Tuesday night. I was invited to a retired Jewish lawyer's house for dinner. After dinner, because during dinner, I was speaking rubbish. So when I left, he took a book from the bookshelf and gave it to me and said that, read this, it's good for you. And the book's name is called The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. The book changed my life.
Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek had written The Road to Serfdom near the close of World War II. He argued that the same collectivist impulse that drove National Socialism in Germany and Communism in the Soviet Union also threatened democracies like Great Britain. He warned that freedom could not long survive the state's attempt to centrally plan its economy. Hayek predicted that if a democracy followed such a path to the end, it would inevitably destroy itself.
You read between the lines of his passion for freedom. It's almost like religious. This is fantastic. It's so uplifting for me.
For Hayek, the state, not just individuals, could violate the rule of law. He maintains that government efforts to dictate economic equality did not extend the rule of law, but destroyed it. Hayek compared the rule of law to a state providing road signs, but without commanding people which road to take. Only if the state accepts its limited role can real freedom prosper. The book's passionate case for freedom lit a fire in the young salesman. On his return to Hong Kong, Jimmy Lai landed a job as a manager in a garment factory. It would be a watershed year.
I got a bonus of 7,000 Hong Kong. It was not enough to start a business. So I said, okay, look, let's try my luck and speculate in the stock market. If I'm lucky, I make some money, and then I start my own business. And then before I did it, I bought a lot of books about, stock market books to know how to speculate.
Jimmy Lai proved himself an astute investor and quickly built a nest egg. With his profits and help from a friend, he soon had the capital to think big.
I really like to create things. I got a rich friend of mine who's my partner, whose father can sign a personal guarantee to get some money from the bank. So that works out, and then that's how I built the factory, and then I went into the retailing business.
In 1981, he founded a clothing chain which he named Giordano, after an Italian restaurant in the United States. The company quickly expanded from Hong Kong into mainland China. Within a decade, there were over 200 Giordano stores worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Jimmy Lai had made it in one of the most competitive clothing markets in the world. And then suddenly everything changed. The young, incredibly successful entrepreneur became emotionally involved with the pro-democracy demonstrators under brutal attack by their government in Tiananmen Square. It was 1989.
When I first noticed what happened in Tiananmen, I was very moved. I always tried to run away from China since the time that I escaped from it. Anything China represents is something that I want to forget. I want to be keeping as long a distance from it as possible, at least emotionally. It's something becoming very disgusting for me. Actually, I didn't feel anything about China until Tiananmen Square happened. All of a sudden, it's like my mother was calling in the darkness of the night. And my heart opened up. It's like going back to the warmth of your mother. I was very excited. I wanted to get involved. So I gave money, I gave t-shirts, I do a lot of things. I had banners in my shop, ask Deng Xiaoping to resign, and then print those Tiananmen Square heroes in the t-shirt and sold it at a very cheap price. So I was doing a lot of things. I got involved and I was very excited, and that's why I went into the media business. I asked myself, I make enough money. If I just go on making money, it doesn't mean anything to me. But if I go into the media business, that I deliver information, which is choice, and choice is freedom. I was thrilled by the idea that, I can be part of the institution that is delivering freedom to a society like China. Of course, that which was a misconception. I thought China, after the June 4th massacre, will be open up to the world and to freedom for its people. It hasn't yet.
Hong Kong media avoided criticism of the communist leadership, but not Jimmy Lai. He refused to play it safe and publicly criticized Premier Li Peng for his role in the Tiananmen Square massacre. It was a fateful decision.
I wrote an open letter to Li Peng, and said some harsh things about him. We had shops in China, and we were threatened that if I still own the company, they're going to close down the shops in China. So one day I was in Paris in the morning, 6:30. I received a call from the then CEO and saying that, look, Jimmy, you got to sell your share in the company. The greatest potential is in China, and if our doors close there, we're finished. We're toast. So I said, go ahead, sell it.
It was a year after the Chinese government forced him out of his own company that Jimmy Lai changed course. He launched a newspaper, Apple Daily. Undeterred by the attack on his interests, Lai pushed his writers to create a blend of consumer and muckraking journalism. There were some costly setbacks, but a decade later, the entrepreneur expanded into Taiwan. Jimmy Lai continued to take risks, and once again was at the top of his game. Apple and Next soon became leaders in the crowded Hong Kong and Taiwanese media markets. Only in a free society can an entrepreneur succeed. Jimmy Lai succeeded because he believed in himself and in the future, and because he was willing to take risks.
I learned risk without knowing that it's a risk. Taking risk is actually dashing into hope. You're just dashing into the future and hoping that it's going to be better.